Welcome to another episode of the Snakes Are Us TV podcast, presented by Southeastern Reptile Rescue and its founder and director, me, Jason Clark.
Are you ready?
All right. Can you hear me? So last week I couldn't figure out how to work my microphone, and you guys couldn't hear me. So make sure I've got it going now. Okay. Welcome to episode number 21 of the Snakes Are Us TV podcast. I'm Jason Clark, and on this episode we're talking about handling. Handling what? Handling snakes, handling reptiles in general. We'll mainly talk about snakes, but maybe we'll touch on a few other reptiles as well. I'm really glad to be back tonight. I miss being here. So we've got some people already joining us in the chat, a few of you. If you want to be a part of it, we record this live on YouTube every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On YouTube, on our channel, Snakes Are Us TV, and you can go and join into the live chat if you want, and then later we put these episodes up on all your streaming platforms for podcast. But I thought it'd be cool to talk about handling. Handling snakes is a topic that comes up a lot with me. Because I do a lot of handling, and there's certain people who want to. There's certain people who want to know how to handle snakes, and other people who look at me handling snakes and is like, I don't think you're doing it right. That snake's a little too close to you right there. So So I guess we'll start off with, let's see here, and then just a little bit. You can go put some stuff in the chat if you have any questions about snake handling or alligator handling. Maybe we'll talk about that too. Handling turtles, moving them off the road. That's something we probably need to cover. But one thing, just a simple basic thing that I get all the time about handling snakes is I will see people say, yeah, when, like if you're petting, say you have a pet snake, okay, and you're gonna let somebody pet this snake. And I'll have parents tell their kids all the time as I'm walking over to them with a snake, they'll be saying, hey, now, when you rub the snake, make sure you rub it this way. You have to rub it with the scales. You can't go against the scales. That's a myth. Okay, you can rub the snake either way you want to rub it, frontwards or backwards. They think that if you rub it backwards and it lifts the scales up, that hurts the snake. It does not hurt the snake. Now, if you grab the scales and you peel them off the snake, of course, that's not what you're doing. So you can rub a snake if you're petting it either way. But with that said, I think I should probably mention that, well, and this may be a little controversial, but in my opinion, which doesn't mean anything, is my opinion. In my opinion, snakes do not like you to hold them. They don't care about you holding them, and there's always people that's going to be out there to say, oh, well, my snake loves me. My snake, my bearded dragon loves me. My leopard gecko loves me. I can tell that it likes me. It doesn't like other people, and it wants to come to me. So I know people will argue with me on this, and this is my opinion. I'm probably wrong, but just telling you what I've seen. People will call me all the time and they'll say, hey, I need to give up my reptile. I need to get rid of this bearded dragon. I need to get rid of my ball python. I'm feeding it, I'm cleaning the cage, and it's got a good life, but I feel I'm neglecting it because I don't have time to spend with it. I used to take it out and hold it all the time. I don't have time to do that, and I know it misses that. I'm like, your snake's probably doing so much better that you're not holding it, And when people call me, because ball pythons are notorious for this, of just not eating, they'll go on a hunger strike sometimes, and people who haven't had a lot of experience with reptiles may go out and say, oh, there's a problem. What's wrong with my reptile? This ball python's not eating, and they kind of freak out about it. But the thing about that is ball pythons do that often, and I'll often ask that person, what are you doing with your ball python? How often do you hold it? They're like, oh, well, I try to hold it every day. I'm like, well, that's the problem. Holding a snake, interacting with this thing, in my opinion, causes sometimes a little bit of stress to the snake. Now, does the snake like for you to hold it? Sometimes they do, not because they like you or they know you. You got body heat you're giving off, and they like that your hands are warm or your body's warm, and you're cuddling them in your arm. They have a little nice soft place to hide, a dark place to hide, and it's warm. That's what they like, But I'm trying to go find the chat here. I guess I'll go to my YouTube channel so I can see what you guys are seeing. So in the chat, real quick, we got Chris Taylor's back. Candy Critters, hello. Painted Rocks is here again. Catherine Ryan, John Huggins, and Chocolate Cookies. We've got some more people coming in here. So there's a few more there. So if you're new here to the chat, go and tell me where you're from, what state you're in, or what country you're in, wherever you're at. And handling snakes, right over here behind me on this side, right over here, is this big, here, I'll just grab it. This big picture, I don't want to grab it. There's a big document framed over there. That's from Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission. And I think I showed that before in the podcast. I went down and did a venomous snake handling class with them that I was invited to go do. And I took some of the venomous snakes with me down there that we're going to be using in the class. I took several different species of venomous snakes, exotic venomous snakes, things like that they wanted to use in the class. And that was a lot of fun. And so when it comes to handling snakes, I've been handling snakes. Wow, man, this is my 40th year handling snakes. So the first year I wasn't that experienced. I was 7 years old. I'm 47 now. So this is my 40th year handling snakes. And shortly after that first snake, I did start going and, dealing with venomous snakes. And I remember as a kid, I always asked my mom several times if she would get me a snake hook, okay, like this right here. Just a snake hook. Sorry, I'm getting the mic and knocking things over. I wanted a snake hook so bad that I could use to catch snakes with. And I remember she told me one night, if I go buy you one of those, you're just going to catch venomous snakes with it. Well, I was already going to do that anyway. And so I had learned to kind of catch them without the hook because I didn't have one. And then when I finally did get a snake hook one year for Christmas, I loved it. But I had to kind of reteach myself then how to handle venomous snakes the right way. And so we'll show you some of those tools here in a minute and go over some of that. But, I get a lot of questions about people wanting me to teach them how to handle venomous snakes. And I've done a lot of that. I've done classes for law enforcement. I've done classes for other first responders, fire departments, EMS. I've done lots of classes for animal control agencies, mainly government agencies and, professionals that I've taught how to handle and capture and remove and relocate venomous snakes. And I think the first time I ever taught a class on handling was a long time ago. I think it was around 2008, maybe 2008, 2009, somewhere in there is when I taught my first snake handling class. And I don't do that a lot. I don't advertise that, hey, I teach snake handling, mainly just because the liability of it, you go and teach somebody something and then they don't do it exactly the way you teach them and get themselves bit, which definitely would be a good thing. But but we are going to offer some more of those classes coming up. Will I ever offer that to the public and make that available? I don't know if we'll do that or not. But anyway, so when I got my first snake hook, I got a hook because these were much harder to find. I didn't know where to get these. So these things, And look, I try not to show a lot of things on camera, even though I do almost every episode. I try not to, because if you're listening to this, I want you to still get as much out of this podcast, whether you're watching it or listening to it. But just to let you know, I'm showing a pair of tongs. Tongs, these are the things that have the little handle on the end. You can squeeze it, and it closes the grip. Hello? Did my mic just go out? Testing 1, 2, 3. All right. Something just went quiet on my mic here. Give me 1 second. Let me pull this up. Testing. Can you guys still hear me okay? What happened there? My level on my mic went down. Okay. So anyway, so those are my snake tongs. And I wanted some of these, but looking back on it, I'm really glad that I did not get these. At the time, when I was young, I didn't know where to get these things, but I would have gotten these because I thought, this is what you need. You're gonna be catching venomous snakes. This is the thing you need because you can grab them safely and not get yourself bit. And you can grab them safely and not get yourself bit. You can do that with those. The problem with these is there's a couple problems. One problem with these is they can very much so injure a snake really, really bad, really bad. And so these have to be used with great care, and you kind of have to know how to use them. Most of the tongs out there don't have this wide grip on here. Most of them have that little ski, little arm that comes out and it grips real tight, like a pair of pliers almost. And that can, man, it breaks the snake's ribs. It can injure the vertebrae, cause tons of damage that you won't see. The snake, he may look like he's fine, but you can really injure a snake with a set of tongs if you don't know how to use them. So most of the time, people using tongs like this, the main thing I use these for is reaching into cages, moving things around. If there's a venomous snake there, picking up a water bowl, picking things up near venomous snakes where I don't want to reach my hand to pick it up. Now, there are some times I will actually use these to catch a venomous snake. Most of the time I don't, but there's sometimes I do. Like one time, a time I think these are helpful is when I'm looking for water moccasins or water snakes. Snakes are in the water that you can't really get to very well with a hook. And I've caught plenty of those with a hook. Sometimes it's easier to get those with a set of tongs, but you have to be very careful doing that. Other times, even non-venomous snakes, rat snakes, things like that, I've used tongs to catch them with, not because I didn't want to use my hand, but they may be in a position or a place in an attic somewhere where I just can't get my big old self back in there to physically reach them and get my hand on them, but I can get a set of tongs in there pretty easily and reach in and grab that snake gently and pull them out. But yeah, so anyway, when it comes to handling snakes, I think people have a big misconception about how to, especially venomous snakes, okay? Because when I'm doing my presentations, my talks, when I go into these shows all over the place, I'll often ask the question sometimes, how's the best way, if you have to grab a venomous snake, how's the best way to grab this venomous snake? And almost always they'll say, well, you grab it behind the head, right? You grab it behind the head. Well, now, like I said, this is all my opinion, and not that my opinion means anything, okay? But in my opinion, there's two different people who grab a venomous snake behind the head. One is a professional doing some type of a medical procedure, milking the snake or examining the snake for whatever reason. And this is a professional who's trained and knows how to do this. That's one person who grabs a snake behind the head. The other one is a person who does not know what they're doing and will eventually get bit. Okay? There's very few times you ever need to pin a snake by the head and hold them in that way. That's a very dangerous way to do this. Now, some people say, oh, well, that's how I do it. That's how I've always done it. eventually you're going to get bit doing that. Maybe you've done it a long time, maybe you held a bunch of snakes, but I've done this for 40 years, and I handle venomous snakes almost on a daily basis, almost every single day it seems like. And I've never been bit yet, and I want to keep it that way. I've never been bitten by a venomous snake one single time ever in my life. Okay, and I've had some close calls, but I've never been bit. So that should say something. Okay, but the problem with pinning a snake behind the head is, well, how many fangs does a venomous snake have? Most people will say, well, two, right? They have the two fangs in the top, And now, of course, some snakes have rear fangs. There's your rear fang snakes, but most of your venomous snakes have front fangs in the upper jaw, positioned to the front of the mouth. Now, your elapids, which are your coral snakes, your cobras, your mambas, those snakes have smaller fangs fixed in the front of the mouth that are not movable. They're stationary. They just kind of like the rest of our teeth. You can't move them around. Now your pit vipers, your copperheads, your cottonmouths, and rattlesnakes, those snakes actually have hinged fangs that they can kind of move independently. Okay, and so I've actually seen snakes holding them, and I've seen that fang slip out the side of their closed mouth. And if I hadn't been paying attention, it could have easily, they don't have to bite to intimidate you. That fang just has to barely poke and puncture your skin and have a drop of venom get in there. You're bit. That is an envenomation. So, and there's also instances, I've never seen this, but I've heard of instances where snakes have been able to protrude their fangs through their lower jaw. That's happened before. It may not be common, but it's a possibility. And if your thumb's down there and that fang comes through and pokes the top of your thumb, not going to be a very good thing. Now, when, let's see. Okay, let me get back to the chat here. So Candy's Critters are asking what brand these are. So these are from tongs.com, and these are called Gentle Giant tongs. And then I've got a few pair. This pair is worn out, but they came with this part coated in rubber. And but this is a big wide base. They're called Gentle Giants because it just has a wider area to distribute the pressure when it's catching a snake. But if you want these, tongs.com, but I don't recommend getting those to catch snakes with. I recommend, if you're going to catch venomous snakes, to use a hook. Now, people will say it's harder to use a hook. Well, it may be harder to use a hook to a person who's never used a hook, but just like with anything, you have to learn how to do it. Now, this particular hook, and I've got eight of these exact hooks, and this is a very specific hook. It is made of titanium. It's very light. And some of you are like, why do you need a titanium snake? What does it mean? Who cares? Well, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, in my opinion, especially if you're going to be handling snakes a lot, is to use the same hook all the time. I've got a bunch of these hooks in all my vehicles, in my snake building, in my snake trailer that we have, our mobile transport exhibit trailer that we have. And they're all the same exact length, they're the same exact weight. And I feel very comfortable with this hook. But one thing that I do all the time is I'll have these hooks with me, and because I'm lazy, and there's something over there, I'll just use my hook to go over there and pick it up and put it back. And I tell people all the time, if you're wanting to learn how to handle venomous snakes, when you get your snake hook, carry it with you all the time and try to pick things up with it. Try to take things and stack them up and just maneuver and move this thing around as much as you possibly can, And this needs to become like your second hand. And one thing that I see with people learning to use a snake hook is they forget that they can turn their wrist. And every single person I've ever taught how to use a hook does the same thing. when they want to move the hook in this position, instead of moving their wrist, they move their whole entire arm and shoulder. And it makes it much more difficult. But just moving your wrist and manipulating things with this is a good thing. Now, I said I use this hook all the time. I do have some different hooks, but this is my main go-to hook. But can this little thing actually be of any value? This little tiny, I'm showing a very small snake hook, 6 or 7 inches long. Now it's a telescoping, it telescopes, okay? And so it extends out to a couple feet maybe, but it has a little tiny hook on the end. And the only, I see these for sale at, pet shops and things like that. Now, could this actually be beneficial? Yes. I actually have a few. I've never bought one of these things, but I bet I've got a dozen of them. Because sometimes when people get a king snake or a ball python in a pet store and they see these little tiny cute snake hooks hanging on the shelf, they're like, well, I guess I need one of those, and they buy a hook with it. I don't know why you would need a hook with those, but these are helpful because if there's a pygmy rattlesnake, they can be really small. And I can maybe get a pygmy rattlesnake on this big hook, this 40-inch long, 45-inch long hook. But I can easily get a pygmy rattlesnake on this little hook, Now, one thing that I don't do when I'm training a person to handle venomous snakes is I don't teach this method of handling snakes called tailing, where you tail the snake. You hold the snake's tail. It's called tailing. The end just fell off. So this little hook's falling apart. Okay. But basically what it means is I kind of scoop up the front half of the snake, hold him here, and then the back of the snake, I hold his tail. Now, if you go to my YouTube channel, when you see me handling the venomous snake, that's normally the method you'll see me doing. I'll be tailing the snake. I've got the snake's front half on the hook, and I'm holding the snake's back half, okay? Now, that is a much more advanced way of handling a snake, and it's a much more dangerous way of handling a snake. And unless you have the skill to do that, you can get bit doing that. Because, I have to really be able to judge what this snake is capable of, and that only comes with many years of experience and time doing this. What I mean by that is, if I'm going to handle, let's say, a rattlesnake, okay, and then I've got 2 rattlesnakes I'm going to handle. One of the rattlesnakes, is maybe 18 inches long, okay? Then I have a timber rattlesnake that's, 4 feet long. Well, the 18-inch rattlesnake or the 4-foot rattlesnake, which one do you think would be safer for me to hook the front half of the snake and hold his tail? Is it safer? Not that it's safe. Which one am I less likely to get bit by? The 4-foot rattlesnake or the 18-inch rattlesnake? Well, the smaller the snake, the harder they are to tail. The bigger the snake, easier it is. That's because I use the snake's body weight against him. If I get a little pygmy rattlesnake and I hook him on here and I try to get his tail, well, he's so light. He doesn't have a bunch of weight to him to weight him down. He can easily pop back up and strike and bite my fingers that are holding the snake. So tailing those little tiny snakes, it can be done, and I've done it, but you have got to be very careful, and it's much more difficult to do. It is so much easier tailing a large, heavy-bodied snake because when you've got them in the right position, they can't come up and use that body weight against you. Now, when it comes to handling snakes, some people, and I've got videos on my channel of this, there's a different method of handling snakes, and it is called free handling. Most of you know what free handling are if you know about snakes. If you don't know what free handling is, what it means handling snakes with none of these tools. You don't use any of this stuff, okay? It just means you're using your hands, and that's it, okay? Many, many years ago, back before I had kids, a long time ago, I had a copperhead I had removed from a 911 call. And this copperhead, I decided to keep it and keep it in captivity and use it for education. And man, this was just the most docile copperhead, just laid back, never showed any aggression, never acted like it ever wanted to bite, just chill. And it always ate well, and it was just a beautiful copperhead, and just a nice body weight. It was just a perfect specimen to show somebody a copperhead. And I'd always use a snake hook with it, and I'd pick him up with a hook, and I'd hold the tail and move it, and it was just so calm and just so gentle. And I remember one day, I was tailing the copperhead, and I put the hook down, and I put my other hand under the copperhead, and here I was free handling this copperhead. He was just, his head wasn't sitting on my hand. His head was, a few inches off my hand, maybe 6 inches away from my hand. But this copperhead, I'm just holding him with two open hands, and he's just sitting there just so chill. Doesn't even act like it wants to bite me. And I got a photo taken that day, that minute, of me holding that snake. And this was my favorite snake. I put the copperhead down. I didn't think anything about it. I put the copperhead down, and later on, when I got the picture developed, this was back before digital cameras, I got the picture developed. I was like, oh, that's such a cool picture of me and my favorite snake. So I had it printed. It was like a little 4x6 photo, and I got a little frame, and I put it in a little frame, and I had that little 4x6 photo in a frame of me holding that snake. And it was when I put the picture in the frame that it hit me. I realized it. It was that snake's choice whether or not it could bite me. Me getting bit in that moment was up to the snake. Okay? And I got to thinking, if I'm going to do this the rest of my life, if I'm going to do this professionally, if I'm going to be handling venomous snakes a lot on a regular basis all the time, if I'm going to do that, I can't give the snake the choice of whether or not I get bit. I'm going to have these numbers more in my favor here, okay? And so I've got to never do this again, even though it's easy, even though I know I can do it, even though it's possible, even though it's cool, even though this is my favorite snake. I made a commitment right there to never free handle a snake again. That was the first time I'd ever done it. That was the last time I'd ever done it. I didn't want to just sit there and hold the venomous snake in my hands, as cool as I thought that was. Now, a lot of people still do that. You can go on the internet, and there's tons of videos of people on there free handling venomous snakes, even wild venomous snakes. But that copperhead was. I had that snake for many, many, many years, and it was already an adult when I got it. It was a couple feet long when I got it. And it ended up being a female, and so that was about as big as she got 2.5 feet or so. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful snake. Now, if you go on my YouTube channel, there's a video on there that showcases free handling. Okay, and the name of this video is "How Not to Hold a Rattlesnake." What happened is this guy called us, "Hey, I've got some pet snakes, and I can't take care of I've got a bad situation going on. Can you take these two snakes?" I said, sure. So he lived about an hour or so away from me. So he was going to drive and meet me, and he gets lost, and he calls and said, hey, look, I think I took a wrong turn. I'm in a parking lot of a home improvement store. Can you just meet me here? I said, oh, yeah, that's just 10 minutes away. I'll be right there. And I pull up, and I was not expecting to see what I saw. He's holding in his hands his pet snakes. And these were not ball pythons. These were timber rattlesnakes. And I was not planning on making a YouTube video. I wasn't planning on filming this. We get snakes dropping off to us all the time. But I was like, I got to film this. I get my cell phone and just start filming this. And I get out, my first question to him was, do you need me to identify these for you? These are timber rattlesnakes. And, he had caught these snakes, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 years earlier. Had them for many, many years. And they were babies when he caught them. And I think he did tell me that when they were still young, after he had them for a while, he did get bit at one point by one of them. But these snakes had just gotten used to him and knew he was no threat, and he held them all the time. And in the video, he puts, one of these rattlesnakes is big around as my arm, 4+ foot long. He takes it and puts it around his neck. The other one he's holding in his hands. And he kind of, not hard, but kind of, taps it on the head a couple of times to make it rattle. I'm like, no, don't make it mad, And he even opens his mouth to show it's got fangs. And so I was wondering, man, I wonder if the snake actually really has venom, because there's a thing that they can do to venomous snakes called a ductectomy. What it is done by some vets where they'll go in and surgically cut. They can do two things. They can cut the duct that feeds the venom to the fang, and they can sever it, where they still have venom, but the venom can't get to the thing to bite. Or they can actually remove the venom glands altogether, but it kind of makes the snake's head misshapen. So I think they put these little implants in, believe it or not, to make it look normal. It's crazy stuff. And so I don't have any of those snakes. But I was like, I wonder if that's what these are. Maybe that's what these are. These are venomous snakes that he's got. And so, hang on one second here. A problem with my computer. In just a second here. So anyway, I don't know what, my computer is acting all funky on me here. But we'll go to the chat anyway in just one second. Once I get this up. What I'm doing, I'm recording, even though I'm streaming this to YouTube. I'm also recording this to my computer. And it just said that my laptop doesn't have sufficient space. I had to go delete something on there. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go to the chat here real quick and see who all's in here. Candy's Critters wants to know how big it was. Are you talking about the copperhead? It was a couple feet long. Let's see. John McKinney Jr., thank you for joining us. Mr. Clark, I saw a snake on the side of the road. It was brown and red. What kind of snake is that? Well, I don't know. Brown and red. Where was it? Brown and red. Well, I know there's a snake around here in the southeast called the plain-bellied water snake. They're not brown and red, but the top of them as adults is brown, like a rust-colored brown, and the bottom is like a pumpkin orange. Maybe you don't know the difference in orange and red, John McKinney Jr. I don't know. I don't know if one that's specifically brown and red. I know that one is brown and orange. I do know that. Sometimes when we're identifying snakes, sometimes they're pretty easy, but sometimes you kind of have to know, exactly where the snake's from, and because there's so many different species of snakes, and I don't know them all, to be honest with you. There's so many different kinds. Let's see. Bart Cubbins, did I say anything wrong? Why did my comment not show up? I don't know. I apologize if I did, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I didn't do anything to your comment. So I don't know. Who else we got? Candy Critters, there's not a moderator. Okay, yeah, you're answering back. So yeah, I don't know what happened. We didn't delete your comment there. Sorry about that. So Chris Taylor is asking, why do baby copperheads have the bright green tails at the tip? That's a good question. So baby copperheads, not just copperheads, cottonmouths, pygmy rattlesnakes, all of those snakes when they're born have a bright yellow or greenish colored tail on the end. And they use that as what they call a caudal lure. So they'll basically coil up in their hiding place. They'll put the tail in front of them, stick it straight up, and they'll very slowly start to kind of wiggle that tail to make it look as much like a worm or caterpillar as they can. And then some little critter, usually a lizard, sometimes maybe a toad, will come thinking, because the snake's camouflaged. He's in the leaf litter or somewhere, and he's camouflaged and perfectly still, but this tail is very visible because it's so brightly colored and it's moving around. And the lizard or toad or frog comes to grab the tail, and the snake has its first meal. And so that's how they do when they're young. Now, some snakes, even as adults, will do caught alluring, and will retain a different tail color throughout their whole life. But copperheads, cottonmouths, and pygmy rattlesnakes, as those snakes mature and grow, that tail color does fade, and the adults don't have that color because they kind of learn to hunt and they transition maybe to different types of prey sometimes. But yeah, so let's see who else we've got in here. Yeah, Candy's Critters Answer. Okay, yeah, good. It's a caught lure. They use it to lure stuff to eat. Who else we got? Ellie Royal. Where are you from, Ellie? Just want to say you've got the best. Oh, thank you. You've got the best reptile channel on YouTube. Hands down, Jason. I love your videos. Well, thank you very much for watching, Ellie. That's very much appreciated. Let's see. Bart Cubbins. Oh, well, thank you for agreeing with her, Bart. Appreciate that. Neil Jordan is here. Hello, Neil. Thank you for joining us. And like I said, if you want to join, we record this live on YouTube every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we put the audio version of this up wherever you listen to podcasts. So go check those out if you would like to. Now, back to handling snakes. I can't really explain some of this stuff. I can't do a whole class on handling snakes over a podcast. But, I get a lot of flack sometimes for some of my videos because it looks like I'm putting myself in the danger zone of a snake. And I'm very careful not to do that. The problem that I've got is I've been doing it so long, sometimes I make it look easy. And it's just that I've been doing it for so long. But the problem with doing something for so long is you can also become complacent and just like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm not going to get bit. You never want to say you're not going to get bit. The person who says I'm never going to get bit is the person who's going to get bit. And I've said this before. When I'm going to handle a snake, I try to stop myself and slow down and say, this is probably not what I should say. Speaking this into existence, okay? Don't do this with anything else, but this is what I do. Okay, I'm going to get bit by a snake, and it's going to be today, and this is the one that's going to do it. This is the one that's going to do me in. Knowing that that's a possibility, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but knowing that that is an actual possibility, even though I've done this a million times before, for 40 years I've done this. Just because I've done it a million times before doesn't mean that I can't get bit now. So I have to slow down and take my time. And speaking of slowing down and taking your time, handling venomous snakes has nothing to do with how fast you are. There was somebody said one time, I can't remember exactly how it went, it's pretty funny. They said they knew the fastest man alive. He was so fast, he could reach in and grab a rattlesnake so quick. Too bad he's not here to tell you about it anymore. So something like that, because he ended up getting it. So if you are handling a venomous snake and you find yourself having to make fast movements and all this stuff because the snake is moving fast and you're having to be faster than the snake, you're not going to be faster than the snake. So you have to slow down. The snake may get crazy and he may be doing weird stuff, but you have to slow down and take your time. The one snake I hate dealing with are mambas and forest cobras. I don't like handling those snakes. I've handled those snakes. I've dealt with those snakes. I don't keep those snakes, but I've had to have those snakes come in here. We've had the state bring us those before and say, hey, can you hold and maintain these for us, for whatever reason. So I've done that before. I don't like doing that. I've owned several forest cobras. I've owned spitting cobras here. We've dealt with all that stuff. But The problem with mambas and the problem with certain cobras is that, as opposed to rattlesnakes, they're very good at climbing, you know? And so when I go to tail a cobra specifically, or a mamba, but what, like, you know, if I've got an 8-foot forest cobra, okay, and I got to tail the snake, well, I'm used to just, you know, getting a rattlesnake's tail, and that rattlesnake's tail can hang in my hand, and depending on how big it is, it might be, you know, a foot of the snake coming out and hanging out of my hand, you know. So I've got a bunch of the snake hanging out. But when it comes to a cobra, certain other species, you can't do that, because what happens is their tails are prehensile. What does that mean? It means they can use them to hold on to things, which is bad, okay? Because what you don't want is for that, and it's not doing it to be nefarious. It's not doing it to try to get you, but the snake doesn't want to fall. So it takes that tail, the part that's hanging out of your hand, and he wraps the tail around your hand to hold on so he doesn't fall. You know, rat snakes, corn snakes will do this. Even, you know, boas and pythons will wrap on to hold on to you. Not to hurt you, not to constrict you. I don't want to fall. Here's the problem with that. If I've got a 6-foot, a 10-foot forest cobra, and I've got him on a hook, and I'm tailing him, and the snake starts to come back up at me, what I need to do sometimes I need to drop the snake off the hook and hold the tail and rehook him. Other times, I need to keep the snake on the hook and drop the tail, reposition, and get control of the tail. If that snake's coming up at me, and I got to drop, because here's what happened. The snake can turn on his own body and start using his own body to crawl up himself toward his tail. At that point, you need to let go of the snake's tail, okay? But if he's wrapped around your hand, you can't drop the cobra, and now you got a cobra on your hand, which is not a good thing to have. And so when I'm tailing a cobra, I make sure to hold just a little bit of the tail where it doesn't come out of the backside of my hand, so there's no part of the tail that can wrap around my hand. How did I know to do this? I had a cobra come up at me one time and I couldn't get my hand out. At the last second, I slung him off my hand, and I was like, I will never make that mistake again. Now, you know, no one taught me how to handle venomous snakes. This was something that I did just growing up, and I think just like with any skill, there's certain skills that you can teach. So you can teach someone how to handle a venomous snake, but some of those people you teach will be much better at it than other people will, okay? And, you know, even when I went to Florida twice to do the venomous snake handling course, and that course is not open to the public. This is a course that's put on specifically like for law enforcement, game wardens, things. I'm not a game warden, I'm not law enforcement, but I do work closely with law enforcement agencies and game wardens and things. And so they invited me to participate in this class and asked me, since you're participating, can you bring a bunch of snakes with you? And we'll teach you how to handle them. So it was a great class. In Florida, FWC did an amazing job of putting that class together. Very professional, very safe how they did it. It was great. And I just enjoyed being there and kind of seeing how they did it and stuff. But even when I was in that class, and there were, how many people were in there? Maybe, I don't know, 30 people or so in that class, maybe more. Just me as an objective observer who already knows how to handle all these snakes, watching, could really pick out, okay, this person right here, they probably don't need to do this after this class. I hope they never have a situation to where because some people are just not good at it. Okay. And then others in the class, most of them did very well, you know, but then sometimes you'll see a couple, it's like, yeah, that person probably doesn't need to handle venomous. One of our volunteers, if you're watching, I'm not going to say your name. I want to embarrass you, but we had a volunteer one time that was with me for many, many years, still a friend of mine. and he wanted to know how to handle venomous snakes. And I said, sure. So, we didn't just start him out with venomous snakes. We started him out with non-venomous snakes and handling those. And I told him to get a snake hook and to go home and pick up everything he could with a snake hook and move it around. And he did that. And I said, start handling non-venomous snakes, because he had his own pet snakes. Start handling those with a snake hook. Even though you can pick them up, use a hook to handle the non-venomous ones with. Get good at that. And he was with me for several years. And so as his skill level progressed, the snakes I allowed him to handle progressed. I'll never forget, we were in we're opening up an enclosure that housed an albino eastern diamondback rattlesnake. And he goes to hook the snake, and he's going to bring it out of the enclosure, and he's trying to tail it. And the snake started coming back toward his hand where he was holding the tail, and he knew to drop the tail, which is what he did. The mistake that he made was, remember where I said you have to just kind of slow down? Just slow down and don't try to be faster than the snake. Once he dropped the tail, the snake started to slither and come off the hook. He didn't want the snake to fall and hit the floor. So he reached down to grab the snake's tail, but the snake is doubled over the hook and his tail is right next to his head. And so he reaches to grab it, and I just hit his arm, not, to hurt him, just kind of, no, don't do that. And then when I did that, he's like, oh, whoa, thank you. It was just an instinct to grab the snake, because he loved the snake. He didn't want it to fall and hit the floor, which I didn't either. But I also don't want you to die, So, but he realized in that moment, oh man, I need to slow down, take my time, and you don't need to do fast movements like that, But so many people, have a hard time with that. But he ended up getting better and ended up having his own venomous snakes, and he learned from that, which was a good thing. I had a pet store call me one time, getting off of venomous snakes on non-venomous snakes, because some people don't know how to handle those either. I had a pet store call me one time and say, hey, can you come to the pet store, and we have an albino Burmese python. It's a baby one. We cannot sell the snake. If you will come up here, you can have it. Just take it. It is the meanest snake. It tries to bite everybody. So please just come get this snake. I was like, yeah, free albino Burmese python. I'll come to your pet store and get the snake. So I go in there, and they got it in this aquarium for sale, and it's been there for a while. No one will take the snake. And they're like, yeah, we can't do anything with it. I said, okay, I'll take it. I got to open the cage, and they're like, what, you gonna just take it out with your hand? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm not going to use my foot. Yeah, I'm going to use my hand. I said, hang on a minute. On second thought, you take him out. They're like, I don't want to take it. I said, no, I want to see what your method is of how you take it out. Because it may not be the snake's problem. It might be your problem. They're like, okay, well, we'll see. So the employee at the pet store reaches their hand into the cage, and they're afraid they're going to get bit. So they're trying to test the snake to see, okay, are you in a good mood or are you in a bad mood? And they reach down with their finger, the tip of their finger, and they kind of tap. They tap the snake, and they move their hand back. And the snake turned and looked at them. They moved their hand in again and tapped it and tapped it. I said, well, that's why you're getting bit. Like, what? I said, okay, think of a snake. The snake is out in the wild somewhere. And this is a little baby python. If a bird flies down and finds a snake, the bird's going to eat the snake. What's the first thing the bird's going to do to the snake? He's going to peck at it. And the snake, his instinct says, oh, this is a bad thing. Defend yourself. I said, don't ever poke at a snake. Don't do that. I said, well, what do you do? I said, well, what I do, this is my opinion, on a non-venomous snake, I reach in there, because the snake wasn't paying any attention to us until the pet store employee poked it. And then it turned around. What I did, as I said, watch this. When you put your hand in here, Don't just move down slow because you don't want to scare it and you're afraid that you move fast, it's going to bite you. Open the cage, move your hand in, and lay your hand right down on top of that snake. Not hard, but just let the snake feel your whole hand. Not this, okay? Not this little poke. But lay the whole palm of my hand, my whole fingers on the snake. Let it feel me. And then scoop the snake up. And I did that and demonstrated that the snake was perfectly fine. I take the snake out, and Hanley's crawling around. I put him back in the cage. The pet store employee did it. And they're like, wow, this is amazing. And at that moment, a horrible thought entered my head. It's like, why in the world did I just show them that the snake is not mean? Now they're going to want to keep it and sell it. But no, they did let me take the snake. I was able to take the snake and keep it, thankfully. So that was a good thing. But we get that a lot with people wanting, handling snakes. A few minutes ago, before I started the podcast, I was actually packing snakes up in our transport containers because I have to go do a reptile show. And I was packing up, copperheads and rattlesnakes and, some non-venomous snakes. I packed up an alligator. And the last snake I packed up was a reticulated python named Apocalypse. Her name was Apocalypse, okay? Now, as soon as I opened Apocalypse's enclosure and went to take the snake out to put it in this box, I was like, this is kind of I should not be doing this. I should not be doing this because I immediately started remembering as this snake was lunging and striking at me, okay, that this could go very bad if I'm not on top of my game right here. A reticulated python is the longest species of python in the world. They get longer than anacondas. They get longer than Burmese pythons. Reticulated pythons, it's hard to say reticulated pythons, okay? Retics, they get long and big. And they got some big teeth. If you got a big retic and this thing bites you, it's not nothing. Okay, let's just say that it's not nothing. It's not one you want to get bit by, even though it's not venomous. They just got big, massive teeth. Now, the other thing is these snakes are the strongest snakes I've ever dealt with. They're so powerful. And the one I was getting out of this enclosure, I don't know how long it is, 14 feet long. And the stupid thing was, I was down there by myself doing this. You should never do that by yourself. I should never do that by myself, but I did. And I thought for a second that maybe I'll call my daughter down here and have her just stand there while I do it. That way, if it kills me, they'll know what happened, okay? Because she'll have a witness. But no, I don't know if this is the rule. This is a rule that I heard one time. For every 4 feet of snake like that, you want one person there handling it. So technically, we'd want like 3 people there dealing with the snake. I'm the size of 3 people. I guess maybe that counts for something. But so here's something kind of morbid. Okay, I run a reptile rescue. I love snakes. I don't want people killing snakes. I don't want people hurting snakes. But on the top of this snake's enclosure, there's something that I keep laying right there at all times. A knife. Some of you are like, oh my God, why would you have a knife laying there? Oh my goodness. Why would you have a knife laying there? Well, in case I have to kill the snake. Isn't that horrible? Yeah, but it's the truth. I've known people. I've known individuals, professionals who handle snakes, who have been bitten by their pet, gentle, huge pythons, and they're by themselves, and they get wrapped up. And if that snake gets around your neck, not that it's trying to kill you, but they're so strong and so powerful they just hang on because they don't want to fall and hit the floor. If it gets around your neck, you can it's not gonna suffocate you and cut your airflow off that quick, but it will restrict the blood flow to your brain, which makes you pass out. Now, if someone's there to take the snake off of your neck, blood flow returns, you wake back up, you're fine. But if you're by yourself or the person who's with you can't get that snake off your neck, you will die. Now, I don't intend to ever have to use a knife on a snake, but I think it would be stupid of me not to be prepared to save my own life if it came down to it. It's the same thing with alligators. You know, this alligator picture up here behind me right here of that alligator. I'm standing behind that. There's a picture behind me I took. It's a picture of an alligator walking toward the water, and it's kind of looking over its shoulder behind me. That was an 8 or 9 foot alligator. It was a nuisance gator. I captured it, and this is me releasing it. When I go catch an alligator, most of the time when I'm doing that, I'm completely by myself. And I've got a couple knives on me in different parts, different pockets. I've got a handgun on one side and another one on the other side. Because if it's got my right arm, maybe I can't get to it with my right arm, but I have my left arm to kill this alligator. Now, I don't kill alligators. I'm not opposed to people hunting alligators as long as it's done legally and ethically. But I don't do it. I like gators. I own gators. I catch them and relocate them. But if it comes down to me on the edge of the river at 3 o'clock in the morning and a 10-foot gator has my arm all the way up to my shoulder, I'm probably going to kill this alligator. Okay? I've never had to do that. I've always been careful enough not to do it. But, you know, so let's talk about that. When you're handling an alligator, and if you ever go pull up some videos of people handling it, and I'm not gonna call them out. I know this person, I know this individual. There's a video online of a guy catching an alligator, and there's all kind of jokes people are making about him in the comments, saying he looks like he's getting ready to go play golf. He doesn't look like an alligator handler, and when he walks down into the ditch to catch this gator, he throws a towel on its head, which is the right thing to do, to blind the gator. Then he stands over and straddles the gator, which is the right thing to do. Then he goes to put his hands on the gator's neck and then sit on it, which is the wrong thing to do, okay? When I'm catching a gator, because, you know, your hands can't control that gator. As soon as that gator felt his hands touching, the gator turned around, grabbed him by the arm, and shook him and all this stuff. Now it's easy to sit back and watch the video and pick it apart and tell you what he did wrong. But when I catch an alligator, what I would have done is I would take my snake hook. This is one thing I use right here to catch 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12-foot alligators with, is this snake hook, okay? What I do is I take this rubber handle in that has the rubber on it, and I walk up behind that gator, and I will touch him on the side of his tail right behind one of his back legs. I just kind of poke him, just a little poke. Kind of like the pet store owner did that Burmese python. And that gator, with every might, every muscle in his body, jumps around and claps his jaws, trying his best to kill me. Then I move over here and I tap his tail behind his other leg. Then he jumps around with everything in him and tries to kill me on that side. After I do this to him 15 or 20 times, when he jumps around to kill me, it's a whole lot slower. That lactic acid is built up in his muscles. He's moving slow. I feel much more confident jumping on the back of a worn-out 10-foot alligator than I do that one's been sitting here resting and is ready for a fight, okay? Now, once I tire the gator out like that, then I throw a towel over his head to blind him. Then I stand over and straddle the gator. And then when I go to sit on the gator, I don't put my hands on his neck before I sit on him. I don't sit on him before I put my hands on his neck. Every part of my body touches the gator at the same time. When he feels my hands on his neck, he also has all of this body weight on top of his body to control him. And that's the way I go about handling a gator. You know, you can't take chances with these things. These things are huge, and they will rip you apart if you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing, for sure. Now, one other reptile that I probably should mention, as far as handling goes, are turtles crossing the road. Now, if you see a box turtle crossing the road, just pick it up and move it over to the side of the road in the direction it was already going so it doesn't have to backtrack. Get it off the road. Not a trick to picking those up. If it's a water turtle, those will bite. Pick them up by the size of the shell. You're fine. Get it off the road. Now, if it is a snapping turtle, not an alligator snapping turtle, most people don't know there's a difference between a common snapping turtle and an alligator snapping turtle. We don't really see alligator snapping turtles crossing roads. Those are common snappers. Have a big long tail, okay? Now, some people will say you don't want to grab them by the tail, pick them up because it can injure the turtle, maybe hurt a spine or something. Maybe that's true, maybe not. So best probably not do it that way. If you're going to pick them up, because these things have a very long neck, okay? And they can come way back over and bite you. So I kind of grab them with two hands at the back of the shell and pick this guy up. Now, if that's hard for you to do, especially if it's a big snapping turtle, because he's on the road, you're probably in your car. And I saw something online that I've never done. I was like, that's genius. Why didn't I think of that? So let's just say it's my idea. I have an idea. What I think you should do is get your floor mats out of the car and lay it down and take your other floor mat and get the turtle on the floor mat and then just drag your floor mat of your car to the side of the road and knock the turtle off of it. You don't have to pick him up. I was like, that's perfect. For a person who doesn't know how to handle this properly, doesn't want to get bit, that's a perfect way to move a turtle off the road. So really, really easy way there. Let's go back to the chat here real quick. We've got, who else has joined us in here? We've got, I don't want to miss anybody. Austin Massey. Hello, Austin. And we've got, who else? David Leos. Cheesy Cheetah's back. We've got Nature Nut. Hello, Nature Nut. And Hog Strictors is back. Hello, Hog Strictors. Thank you for joining us. So, yeah. Anyway, handling snakes. I actually had a call today, as a matter of fact, about me teaching a class to a wildlife control company. They want to send their employees to teach them how to handle venomous snakes, which I think is a great thing because it two things it does. One, it teaches the employees the correct way to do this so they don't injure the snake and they don't get bit. But it also helps remove liability off the company. If you're going to be sending your employees in to handle a venomous snake, you probably want to make sure they have the proper training on how to do that. So, anyway, if you want to get a snake hook, and I don't get paid for this, these are not my sponsors. This particular hook, this is like a $70 hook. You can get them a lot cheaper than this. But this one, I love this hook. It's like 45 inches long, and it is called the Professional Snake Hook on tongs.com. Pretty cool hook. I've got several of these things, and they've got, the tongs there and all that different stuff that you can catch them with. But I'd seriously prefer using a hook, because one thing, too, not just because the tongs can injure a snake. When you're dealing with a wild snake and you got to grab it with a set of tongs, and you're clamping down that snake with these tongs right here, that scares the snake because he thinks, oh, somebody's trying to kill me. He starts wiggling and jumping around like crazy. That can further injure the snake, and it can possibly put you in line to maybe even get yourself bit. So definitely not a good thing. But when you're using a hook, if you do it correctly, you can very gently lift the snake up and move it. When I was getting that retic out of the cage earlier, what I had to do, because I was by myself, is I did use a snake hook to do it. I didn't pick him up with a hook. Now, I have a python hook that has a huge hook that you can get a big python with, but it's like a 6-foot long hook, and it's really heavy, and it doesn't work very well. But what I did with my hook is I just kind of used this to caress the snake. Yeah, that's exactly what I do. So This big reticulated python, he's, I don't know, 14 foot long. I will take my hook. I will because this snake is he's like cage aggressive. Once you get this snake out of his enclosure and you're holding him, he's perfectly fine. He'll just crawl around you. He's just chill. But when he's in his enclosure, that's his enclosure. You better not mess with his enclosure. This is his territory. He won't come and get you, but he don't want you coming in there to get him. So he defends himself by striking like crazy. So just to let him know I'm not going to hurt him, I take my hook and I very gently caress the top of his back, top of his head. And the whole time he's trying to kill me, striking at me, I'm jumping back. But I just keep rubbing him gently like that. And sooner or later, the snake calms down. And I'm able to reach in, lift the snake up. And if you know anything about retics, they don't just sit there like a ball python. They're constantly crawling and moving. So he's a bit of a handful for sure. But anyway, I did get him in the box. I didn't get bit. He did, in fact, wrap around my arm, but he was still stretched out. And before I picked him up, I made sure to get him off my arm because those snakes are so incredibly powerful. They can be so dangerous handling a snake that big when you're by yourself. I definitely do not recommend doing that at all. So anyway, as far as next week's podcast, I think I already know what I want to talk about. But I've got two options for next week, and I haven't decided which one I'm going to do yet. But I've got two options. So I'm not going to tell you yet, but I'll tell you next week. Before we go, I was thinking about something. When I started handling snakes, when I kind of got into snakes, I would go online and I would read different chat rooms and different websites and different things and people talking about snakes. And I figured out, man, if you post a question in there, or God forbid, you go in there and tell somebody how you do it, they would just kind of rip you apart. I mean, these people were just vicious, And so I just kind of got to where, you know what? I don't think I'm going to post anything in these groups because people are just so mean on the internet. And over time, I started kind of learning myself and not dealing with these people. But I kind of got to figure out eventually that, you kind of have to not let these people get to you because, man, like I said, people on the internet are so vicious. But it just reminded me of something that I tell my kids all the time. All the time when my kids are facing a big problem, like some really big issue or drama that's going on in their life and something that's not fair, something that happened to them that's just not fair, I always ask them, and I'm sure they're tired of me asking them this. I'm like, okay, well, which one are you going to be? You're going to be a carrot, you're going to be an egg, or you're going to be a coffee bean? Which one are you going to be? They know exactly what I'm talking about. Because there was a person who was trying to explain problems and how you deal with problems. And so if you take a carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean, and you take pots of boiling water, and you bring the water to a boil, and you put a carrot in the boiling water. Okay, and let it boil. You put an egg in the other boiling water, let it boil for a while. You put the coffee bean in the other one. When you go back and look at these things, well, what happened to the carrot? The carrot, you feel of it, and now it's real soft. Okay, the carrot's soft. You take the egg out, and you crack the shell open, and now you got a hard-boiled egg. And then you go over here to where the coffee bean or the ground coffee, whatever it is, you put it in there, and now you got a pot of coffee. And that's what I tell my kids. Every one of these things, the carrot, the egg, and the coffee bean, all of these three things faced the same adversity, the same problem, which was hot boiling water. And this carrot, before it went in, was stiff and straight and tough. But when it went into this problem, it made him weak. It made the carrot weak. And when the egg went into it, well, the egg had this fragile shell. And when it went into this hot boiling water and you take it out, it made the egg hard, like kind of like a hardened heart, or it made it bitter inside. But the coffee changed the circumstance. Okay? Now, that's not to say that the coffee itself wasn't changed too, because it was. Because when you face adversity, when you face problems, depending on how you react to the problems is everything. And it doesn't mean that the problem won't change you too. It can change you. But see, when the coffee bean was changed, it changed the environment. It changed the water to coffee, okay? But the coffee bean was changed too, because through that adversity, the coffee bean just became more useful, And, that's one thing I always remind our kids about, is I tell them, God tells us in the Bible that he will use all things for the good of those who love him. What that means is things that come against you in your life, even if they're not from God, even if these are horrible things that are not fair, that you don't deserve, when you put your trust in Jesus, put your trust in God, he can take the things that he didn't send you, things that were meant to cause you harm, things that were meant to destroy you. He can take those things and turn it around and use it for your good. Okay? So just remember that as you go through this week. All right? And before we get to next week, last thing I want to leave you with, Jesus loves you, and so do I. You guys have a great night, and I will see you next week. Take care. Thank you very much for joining me, and I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider leaving a 5-star review. That helps me so much in pushing this podcast out to even more people. I record every Thursday, so check back next week for a new episode of the SnakesAreUsTV podcast.